Hey everybody, welcome to day 20 of the journal series. This is actually a January 26th video, but I wasn't able to do the voiceover last night because there was just too much noise outside. In this video, we are finishing up these two small watercolor projects. If you remember from the previous video, they both had to dry completely before we could move on. So I'm using the same colors again. So this is Indian Yellow, Quinacridone Lilac, and Indigo. And I'm just going to fill in that section in the middle using a light wash and then building it up as I go. Most of this is going to be repeating the same steps as last time. So doing a light wash, wet on wet, and then going in and adding some more details and carving out the rocks. I went over the sky a little bit right here and was trying to decide how to fix it, whether I should try to blot it off with the rag or what I should do. Later I decided to just go over it with a darker color, and I used my indigo and just made it look like it was a little bit darker and more in shadow right there. Okay, so while that dries, I'm gonna move on to the smaller one. I used phthalo blue green shade and indigo for the sky, and then that same rock mixture for the bottom one, for the bottom part of it. Again, using wet on wet for the background because that's just the one that I prefer, and I think it blends really well. So I'm just dropping that color in there with small circular motions, leaving some white space so that it'll give some highlights naturally, and trying to make it kind of look like the Milky Way. At this point, the phthalo blue just wasn't as dark as I wanted it to be, and that's why I chose to go in with the indigo just to make the dark spots a little bit darker and make the phthalo blue stand out more. I used some clean water a little bit on my brush and was trying to splatter, but I wasn't getting quite enough to actually make the splatters work. And so you'll see me struggle through that a little bit. I didn't want it, I knew with it being such a small area that I didn't want to use a ton of water and just make it go everywhere. Here I decided to mix up a darker version of that rock color to see if I could get some splatters and some texture going in the bottom sand part. So I'm just checking to see if it's completely dry because you don't want to have to go over it again whenever it's still wet because it can mess up all the paint. So if you lay your hand on the back of it and it's still cold to the touch, and you know that it is still wet and you want it to dry more, I did learn that that doesn't work very much if it's very cold in the house because all of it's cold and it's not wet, it's just cold. But usually that is a very good way to tell. I decided to add some layers and make it look kind of like there were sand dunes in the back. And so I'm going through with just a line and then I'm softening the bottom of that line and then adding more layers as I go. I decided to go back to this one and add some more shadows and darker spots just to make it pop a little bit more. And so I'm going through with my indigo and making sure to carve out the one that's in front and make sure that it has enough depth to really be able to tell them apart. This process of going through and actually adding darker shadows and making it where the rocks just pop and you're like carving out the rock is one of my favorite processes because you just look at where you can naturally see it and then you add the darker and it just like makes it shoot forward. No night sky would be complete without stars, and so I am covering the bottom so that I don't get as much white on the bottom. And then I'm using my white watercolor because I didn't feel like finding the gouache. And I'm going to use a angle shader brush. And you don't want it to be too thick because then it won't come off, but you don't want it to be too thin because then it'll have too much water in it, and when it evaporates, it'll just look funny. And so it's a very fine line that you have to navigate right there. And so it it's kind of tricky. it doesn't look like much is coming off, but there actually is some coming off. It's just so small that the camera's not picking it up very much. I had the bright idea of getting some scrap pieces of paper and just covering up those rocks, but it didn't quite work like I wanted it to. And so you'll actually see later that it does get on the rocks, and I just used tiny bit of water on my brush and just spread out the white that got there and made it blend in so that it wasn't so obvious. One of the reasons I don't usually like using a paintbrush for my stars is because it can leave a little bit of a splatter look. And with stars, I don't necessarily want that. And so I decided to go make those splatters look like they were blending into the background the same way I did the rocks, just to give it a more starry night effect than abstract look. I would normally use a cheap toothbrush. One without the silicone bristles would be best. Soft, but no silicone bristles. But I misplaced that one in the move, and so I only had a paintbrush to use for now. And it works, I just prefer to use a toothbrush. wanted to add some bigger stars, and so I thought that maybe if I just used my round number two, I could get the look I was going for, but it didn't look round enough. It didn't give it that circular feel. It looked more just like a splotch. And so I tried for a couple of minutes and I just did not like the way it was looking. I decided to find my embossing tool. I've used these multiple times with acrylics and they've always turned out really good, and so I thought I would try that. And they look a lot better than just using the round brush, but it still wasn't quite what I wanted, but I decided to just go with it. Here I am using my adhesive eraser and removing that masking fluid. I like using the eraser more because it doesn't leave any weird residue over it, and it also helps not rip the paper, in my opinion. So I just rub my finger over it, make sure I don't feel anything else, and then it's ready to paint. For the cacti, I'm actually using the same colors as I did for the rocks. I'm just leaning it more towards the green side. So more Indian yellow, more indigo, and just leaving that quinacridone lilac in there that was already in that mixture area as a muting color because you don't want it to be too bright. Here I'm adding shadows with my indigo. I kind of had it where the light source was coming from the center of the painting just because that's where it's brightest. So I'm just going along the right side on this one, the right side and the bottom, and then on the other side of those cacti, I'll do the left side. And then I've said before that shadows are very hit and miss with me. I either get them spot on and they look great, or they don't really turn out how they're supposed to, and I really have to play with it just to get something that I'm semi happy with. Today was more the play with it and get something that I'm semi happy with. So I tried to just use a darker version of the rock color, and that didn't quite give me the depth I wanted, and so I went back in a couple of minutes with some indigo. After playing it with it for a few minutes, I was finally okay with how it was looking, but it was definitely a process to get there. Okay, and that is it. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Stay tuned for more. Don't forget to like and subscribe, comment if there's something you want to see, and enjoy the journey.